Denver's citywide curfew is now in effect for a third night, 9 p.m. this evening to 5 a.m. tomorrow. Starting an hour later than the curfew the last few nights, runs overnights through Friday morning.
Mayor Michael Hancock extended that curfew through the week because of this. 4 nights of smashed glass, fires, tear gas, and foam bullets, destruction that followed peaceful daytime protests. Calls for justice for the death of George Floyd.
Before tonight's curfew took effect, Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin went out to join protesters in marching. Chief spoke with the protesters, answered their questions. Chief Pazin is scheduled to join us live during this newscast in just a moment.
We have a lot to cover tonight. We're following it all from the ground, from the air. Let's get to Mark Salinger. Mark?
Yeah, it is very loud out here as the protesters are marching down Welton. We're just in the 5 Points area, and now we're marching back towards the downtown area. It has been extremely peaceful so far this evening. We have also seen almost no police officers. We do see police officers on the side streets controlling traffic to make sure that no car comes through and injures any of the protesters, but there have been almost no police officers on the protest route that the protesters have interacted with. Now, what you're seeing right now marching through the streets is not what this protest has been for the majority of the day. I want to show you some video of what it was like earlier. We saw a lot of people taking a knee and celebrating the life of George Floyd and saying that they don't need violence to protest whatever happened. They took a knee with one hand raised, one fist raised, and there were a lot of people who wanted to say to us that whatever happens tonight, if there is violence for another night, that isn't necessarily what this entire protest is about. They don't want their message to be drowned out.
You're tarnishing a powerful movement right now, and it's not allowing us, it's not allowing our word to be heard. You know, the people that would listen are now upset because people's personal property is being damaged, you know, and that's not what this is about.
Oh, I'll be here tomorrow. I plan on being here pretty much every day until we see some change. If it's not protesting out on the streets, it'll be protesting in my own way.
Like, we still saying Black Lives Matter for the past decade, you feel me? And nothing has changed. People are still dying.
And it is, again, very important to point out that this protest has been completely peaceful. There have been no interactions with the police that we have seen so far. We, again, really haven't even seen police officers along this line. It's just been protesters, a lot of them with their hands out, hands up, saying hands up, don't shoot. Also a lot of signs, of course, remembering George Floyd. But we'll be out here. We're walking now back towards downtown from the 5 Point area, and we will be out here with them as they continue throughout the evening. Kyle?
Mark, from the looks of things, more signs with messages, fewer shields than we saw on Saturday night.
Yes, a lot fewer shields, at least so far tonight, but a lot of signs and a lot of peaceful protest, a lot of chanting, and a lot of people who really want to avoid any violence tonight and say, you know, our message is just to protest this peacefully.
All right, Mark Salinger, walking and talking and not running into any telephone poles. Masterfully done, sir. We'll talk to you again in a moment.
Good job, Mark. So when you look at the images from Denver's protests, one thing stands out. Many of the people in the crowd are white. Some anti-racism activists say that's a good thing because it's going to take the white population to end systemic injustices. When our crews talked to a few white protesters, they said they were there to educate themselves by meeting people of color and learning about the problems they're still facing. A leader of the Equity Project says that's been made a little easier, actually, because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I do think that this health pandemic, along with the pandemic of racism, all happening simultaneously in a way that is elevated and illuminated, really helps people to understand the lived experience of other people in a different way than we've ever experienced it. And I am filled with hope because of that.
Dr. Mosby Tyler says a big concern is that all the support they have right now during the protests are going to go away when they stop. She says rather than allies, they need accomplices, people that will fight alongside with them long after the marching and the chanting stops. Over the past few nights, we have seen plenty of dumpster fires in Denver. And tonight, Denver Fire got proactive. About an hour ago, they started to spray down the dumpsters. Yep, make them good and wet. The idea is to soak them so it's not so easy to set them on fire.
We've seen the same predictable pattern as day turns to night. So now we just kind of wait to see what's going to happen, because we had another peaceful protest during the day. A lot of folks gathered in front of the state capitol where they made a memorial to victims of police brutality and shared messages hoping for change and justice in America. And now the question will be, what will come tonight? These protests have centered there at the Capitol, and they've also centered on the Capitol Hill neighborhood, where folks there have had a front row seat for days on end now. 9 News reporter Katie Eastman talked to some of them.
Yeah, Kyle, and we're at the Capitol right now, where most of the people have cleared out. The protesters that are still here are protesting peacefully past the curfew. Just like last night, Lincoln Street has been closed off by police, but there are no officers here in riot gear. Just up the street so sorry about that. Just up the street at the closest police station to us, there are officers getting ready in riot gear, standing behind fences like we saw last night. And we spoke with two men that live in the Cap Hill neighborhood, but who both have very different sides of how they feel about these confrontations in their neighborhood.
Right here across our street is the precinct, the nearest one to the Capitol building. The windows don't stop anything. We have children and pets that are affected by the tear gas being launched at our building and at our residence here. You can see in front of the door the pepper bullets, the residue.
We cleaned it so good. Yeah, I live right over the street over there. I look to this place as my home now, and I want to take care of it, and I don't like seeing all the vandalism and stuff.
Things can be replaced, human lives can't, and that's why this all started in the first place.
If people want to peacefully protest, I'm all for that, but just don't vandalize. These are people's businesses, these are families' businesses and everything, and they don't deserve to have their stuff graffitied on and vandalized.
And we just heard what may have been a few fireworks fired off. It's hard to tell. We're hearing a lot of loud noises lately, whether they're flashbangs or fireworks. We never quite know. But last night, we saw a lot of the confrontations with police and protesters in the Cap Hill neighborhood at Colfax in Washington, right where that District 6 police station is. So we're keeping a close eye on if protesters head that way tonight. Kim and Kyle.
All right, thank you, Katie. Hopefully it is just fireworks for a good deal of time. So far, the tone seems to be pretty good tonight. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Thank you.
We've learned that Denver police seized weapons and tactical gear from two men who came to Friday's protest. One of them is connected to a far-right extremist group that is preparing for a coming civil war in America. Here's 9 Wants to Know reporter Jeremy Hohola.
While people protested on Friday in Denver, among them were two men who came under the eye of Denver police, and this is what officers say they seized from them. 3 assault rifles, handguns, and other tactical equipment like gas masks, vests, numerous magazines, and ammunition. Through social media postings and by his own confirmation, we learned one of the men is Chevy McGee of Fort Collins. We put him on air last month when he live streamed on Facebook.
Just being prepared. Show the people prepared. We're ready, rock and roll.
That was McGee's reaction in early May when another Colorado man, Bradley Bunn, was arrested by the feds for possessing pipe bombs. McGee told me over text messages the guns police seized were all in his trunk and that he and a friend were at the protest to see what was going on and provided medical and water to people. McGee and his friend were not arrested and not charged and claims he always keeps guns in his trunk because we are avid shooters. Police confirmed to us they seized the guns but would not comment on why they took the firearms without charging or citing the men. McGee identifies with the so-called Boogaloo movement, a group who says it's preparing for a civil and race war. Jeremy Hohola, 9 News.
Again, police would not explain why they seized those guns, but yet did not cite the men. Denver police arrested 284 people in the streets over the weekend, dating back to Thursday. According to DPD, only 6 of them are known to live out of state. 76 of them were classified as DPD as being Colorado residents. Many were listed address unknown. The majority of the people arrested, 170, were arrested on Sunday, and most of those on curfew violations.
RTD has decided to restore some service in and out of downtown Denver after a weekend without it. Bus and rail service has been suspended since Thursday because of the ongoing protests. RTD says now, because of fewer protests downtown, it believes it's safe to get service going again tomorrow morning. But for the next 3 days, the last bus and train out of downtown will leave by 6:30 p.m. At that point, Union Station and the Civic Center station will close. RTD says it will keep a close eye on things downtown tomorrow and make changes if necessary.
93 degrees for the first day of June. We just missed a record. Tracking isolated thunderstorms tonight. A radar update just ahead.
With everything going on, remember, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. It'll take time before we know whether we'll see a spike in COVID-19 after the protests.
Sky 9 is back out over the Capitol building in Denver tonight as we watch the transition to curfew time. We had hours and hours of peaceful protests in the streets. It is 9:14 in Denver, and per the city order, folks are supposed to be home right now. Peaceful protests continue with folks marching through downtown. We have not seen the early confrontations with police officers that marked a number of the earlier nights.
A beautiful spring evening here in the 9 backyard. It is warm and is mild, and we've missed out on the severe weather today, but almost broke a record with our high at 93, the record 96. As we take a look at some beautiful scenes coming in this evening of the sunset off to the west tonight. Anderson sending this in from the Byers area. Beautiful pictures from Alamosa as well. 93, a far cry from the average of 77. We'll stay in this territory for most of the upcoming week. We have just enough moisture for isolated storms tonight and again tomorrow. DIA still at 74 this 9 o'clock hour with light winds out of the southwest here in the 9 News backyard. And you know what? It has been relatively quiet here weather-wise. We're tracking some storms all around the area. A little bit of lightning, a little bit of wind, no hail, and no severe storms. Most of the energy has been to the south of us. Some of this moisture circulating around, a little disturbance to our south. But high pressures coming in, also pulling in some tropical moisture. We'll see a weak front approach from the north, and that may bring temperatures down a few degrees over northern Colorado. And this will also be the area, the focus for hail-producing storms, and that does include extreme northeastern Colorado tomorrow. Temperatures will run 10 degrees above average for tomorrow and probably go even warmer Wednesday and Thursday. We're monitoring this area here for additional development overnight tonight, and then we'll see some scattered thunderstorms develop south of the city again tomorrow. Light winds around the area, a mild night, a very muggy night. Temperatures 55 to 60 for lower elevations, 40s in the high country. Again, keeping in mind the average high is 77, 80s, 90s for eastern Colorado, 70s up over the higher terrain and close to 90 in Grand Junction. Foothill temperatures 74 in Evergreen, close to that in Bailey, and Boulder, Arvada, and Commerce City will be in the mid to upper 80s as well. Isolated storms still possible tonight under partly cloudy skies. Are low at 60. Tomorrow we'll have sunshine. Clouds increase by the midday as that weak front moves through northern Colorado. It should set up south of the metro area, and that's with a focus for thunderstorms late in the day. We have temperatures close to 90 heading into the weekend, with perhaps a better chance of rain from storms on Friday. Perhaps another scene like this one on the digital network tonight.
As we continue to keep an eye on protests in the city of Denver for the 5th consecutive night, want to bring back in Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin on the phone to talk about the situation. Chief Pazin, thank you again for your time.
Certainly, Kyle and Kim, thanks for having us.
If we continue to see what we're seeing right now, which is folks peacefully protesting, but after the curfew time, will your officers move on them for violating curfew alone?
Again, we want to commend the organizers, actually 3 of them, if you don't mind, Neil, Dakota, Ashira, for organizing peaceful protests. This is exactly what our community needs, and we will fully support peaceful protests through our streets without having to invoke any of the curfew violations.
So just to be very clear with everybody who's listening and watching, violating curfew alone is not reason for your officers to use force on someone.
So again, we don't want to get mixed up on any of this. Certainly being out after 9 is a violation, but we are not going to go in force to address this. We want to maintain and facilitate peaceful protests.
Appreciate that clear answer. You have called for internal affairs investigations of videos that appear to show officers using force against peaceful protesters. You've also called for an investigation of an Instagram post attributed to an officer, which shows him in riot gear saying, "Let's start a riot." Can I ask, have those officers, to the extent you've identified them, been removed from the streets while they're under investigation, or are they still out there tonight?
So I myself am the one that initiated the internal affairs complaint on this. I'm very disappointed, and I can tell you that without getting into specifics on discipline, officers that demonstrate that they can't display good judgment and discretion will not be out here addressing these significant challenges that we face.
Have you pulled an officer for that reason so far?
Most certainly. If officers cannot demonstrate patience, good judgment, and discretion, then they will not be out here.
Chief, President Trump's talking about sending the military into American cities. What would happen if the president tried to send the military to the streets of Denver?
Well, again, what we need is to dial everything down. What we need is to come together. We certainly need to work together to do what many of the peaceful protesters are talking about. How do we enact meaningful change? How do we hear these voices that people are telling us their frustration so that we don't have any additional horrific tragedies like the killing of George Floyd?
And Chief, one last question for you. Tonight seems different in a positive way. Is it because your guys, your men and women are behaving differently? Is it because the protesters are behaving differently, or is it both?
Well, again, our response is truly dictated by the actions of instigators, people that cause harm and damage to our city and the people of Denver. And we will respond if any types of actions cross that legal boundary where property is damaged, destroyed, or people are hurt. So we stand ready, but if we're talking peaceful protests, we certainly will support and facilitate peaceful gatherings. We want to work together because unity is the only way we get out of this.
Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin, thank you for your time. I know we are all hoping for a peaceful night. Thank you, sir. We'll be right back.
This is the view from Sky 9, night 5 of protests in Denver. It's about 9:25, 25 minutes past the curfew. Still plenty of people out there, but it does feel like a very different tone, even for those of us at a distance tonight. The crowd has been very peaceful all day, as we've seen every day during the daytime, but tonight they are still chanting, they're holding signs, So far, police are keeping a good distance at this point, keeping an eye on them. We'll see how things sort out through the evening. We'll keep you posted. You know, amidst all of this, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. Health experts have warned crowded protests could lead to a spike of COVID-19 cases. Colorado's Public Health Department says it won't know if that's the case for about 2 weeks. As of today, more than 26,500 Coloradans have tested positive for the virus. That's out of the more than 188,000 who have been tested since the pandemic began. 272 who are still in the hospital right now with the virus. More than 1,100 deaths are due to COVID-19. The state's health department wants people who went to the protests and have COVID-19 symptoms to get tested right away. Those with no symptoms are being asked to wait 7 days to get a test as well. Colorado has entered the next phase in reopening. Democratic Governor Jared Polis signed a new executive order. It's got a long title. It's called Safer at Home and in the Vast Great Outdoors. You get it. Go outside. The state released draft guidelines for houses of worship as well, and it would limit worshipers at indoor services to 50 people or 50% capacity, whichever is fewer. Outdoor services, well, it depends on the capacity levels, as long as the groups are 6 feet apart, and people do have to wear a mask. The guidelines call for more services to actually accommodate more people and worshipers, and the state is encouraging churches to offer registration so that places aren't too crowded. The state recommends anyone older than 65 continue to do their worship online. Coloradans can give their feedback through noon on Wednesday, and then the state will come out with its finalized guidelines. Pools, another thing everybody's asking about. Playgrounds, tennis courts, basketball courts. They could also open soon with limited capacity. Draft guidance from the state says organized sports could resume if it's limited to 25 people outside and 10 people inside. We'll be right back.
Anything is possible. You know, we've had a really rough couple of months, and just to be able to show the country what the agency's made of, what the Commercial Crew Program did, and what SpaceX did. I hope they take some pride and a sense of accomplishment of seeing that.
Anything is possible. Encouraging words during a tough time. Those astronauts made history when they launched from Earth and docked at the International Space Station this weekend. It was the first launch of American astronauts from American soil in nearly a decade, and the first time a privately built and owned spacecraft delivered a crew to the ISS. Astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken will stay there for a few months.
I'll take a ship next. That's fine if they're looking for volunteers.
Everybody wants on board.
I'll bug out for a couple of months. Yeah, they're a long list. We will continue to follow the situation in downtown Denver tonight. It looks more encouraging than past nights. Could we have calm? Let's hope. 9 News at 9:30 is right around the corner.
Okay. We are hoping for a more peaceful night in Denver tonight after 4 nights of trouble after dark. This is the scene outside of the state capitol. Our Katie Eastman has been down there, reported within the last few minutes that people were taking a knee on the Capitol lawn, that organizers were telling the crowd, if they're going to gas us and shoot us, let's be peaceful. You heard the police chief tell us live on the air that they will not move against peaceful protesters simply for violating curfew. So let's see what happens if folks do stick to their word on both sides of this and don't get into it with each other. We have the potential for a peaceful night. With everyone. We have heard there's some fireworks out there. We know the noise right now is voices chanting, making their views heard. And Mark Salinger has been walking with some of the protesters. He joins us now from 14th and Broadway. Mark, what's new from your vantage point?
Yeah, Kim, we want to reiterate that so far the protests have been very peaceful tonight, unlike how we've seen them go at least towards the end of the night over the last couple of days. So far, everything today has been very peaceful. Just to rerun a little bit about what's happened so far today, we started around 5 p.m. here at the Capitol. We're in Civic Center Park right now, and you can see now in the distance there's a large crowd. The large crowd had walked all throughout downtown Denver, going to 5 Points and back, and is now here again in Civic Center Park. There's still thousands of people here. You can see off in the distance there is some fireworks that people are shooting off. There's also been some people doing donuts around in circles in the middle of the intersection there at Colfax and Broadway, which shut down the intersection obviously for quite some time. Now there aren't really many cars that are moving right now in this area, but there are some that are stopped here that were driving with all the protesters while they made their way throughout the city. Of course, as I've said, all the protests right now have been peaceful. We really haven't seen much of a police presence out here yet so far at all today. They weren't out there. As you can see, there's still a lot of people out here chanting whatever they may be chanting. We haven't really seen, again, that many police officers so far today. They were out on the course as they were marching on the side streets and things like that, but they weren't actually interacting with the protesters. We'll see if that changes at all later tonight as more people stay out even longer past the curfew. Guys.
All right, thank you to Mark Salinger. This is a sharp contrast to what we've seen over the last few days. This was a bit of the witching hour before this. And speaking of what we've seen, following 4 nights of damage and destruction, we saw more volunteers in downtown Denver today, helping to clean up. All weekend, we saw workers and volunteers sweeping up glass, boarding up windows, washing off graffiti. Some folks grabbed their family members to head downtown to help.
We think that a lot more people should give out the love for here, and maybe we won't have all this other negativity that's going on around us.
No matter how bad you destroy our city, our community is going to come together to build it up again.
The amount right now that we're having to deal with the graffiti is just a little overwhelming. The Greek Theater, the Voorhees Memorial, the structures that people have been coming to for over 100 years.
The city hired contractors to power wash off some of the graffiti. Business owners around the Capitol say they've had to deal with the destruction of the weekend riots. They have broken windows, graffiti to clean up, and many have already been shut down and are shut down altogether. The owner of Martha's Beauty Salon on Colfax says she was lucky this weekend. Her shop was spared. She does have some damage, though, to deal with from Thursday. It's an unexpected problem when she is just trying to stay in business in the middle of a pandemic.
When you have business, maybe you can have money for pay everything, but look at this, no business.
Valadez says if she has to replace a window, or maybe she'll just board it up because a window could cost her about $500 a piece.
Peaceful protest in Washington, D.C. turned chaotic today when police tear-gassed a peaceful crowd so that President Trump could have a photo op. Police cleared the rioters, or the protesters rather, again, they were not rioting, they were sitting there chanting and so forth outside the White House, so that the president could walk down the street to St. John's Church, where he posed holding up a Bible. Minutes before the Bible photo op, the president announced that he's invoking the Insurrection Act, which allows him to deploy the military to U.S. cities.
These are not acts of peaceful protest. These are acts of domestic terror. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God.
The president called himself an ally of the protesters shortly after police used tear gas and batons to clear the way for his walk outside the White House. The president said that thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers are on their way to Washington to stop the violence. The Insurrection Act was last invoked during the Rodney King riots in 1992. Governors typically prefer to use their own National Guard troops because they're allowed to perform law enforcement duties. Military troops cannot do that without violating an 1878 law that prohibits the government from using military forces as police within the U.S. Late tonight, Governor Jared Polis and Denver Mayor Michael Hancock said there is no need for U.S. troops on Denver streets. In a joint statement, they said, quote, "The president's threat to deploy federal troops is counterproductive and will only stoke the potential for worse violence and destruction." They wrote, "This is a time for healing, for bringing people together, and the best way to protect civil rights is to move away from escalating violence."
Warm with only isolated thunderstorms for the start of the meteorological summer. I'll have the Tuesday outlook just ahead.
Back out from Sky 9 over 14th and Grant, where that view and our crew on the ground both suggest that the crowds are dissipating a little bit. And that would be the end, if it is the end, of a calm and peaceful night in which protesters and police actually collaborated to make it so. Now again, it's 9:42. We've got a lot of night left, and there's lots of other people in town that could make different decisions. But so far, so good in downtown Denver tonight.
Let's hope one good decision leads to another. A new autopsy report refutes how George Floyd died. Doctors who performed the autopsy on behalf of Floyd's family say he died from asphyxiation due to neck and back compression. Floyd was pinned to the ground with a knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes. He pleaded with police and told them he couldn't breathe. The official autopsy cited underlying health issues and potential intoxicants in Floyd's system as other factors as well.
It is a calm night in the 9 News backyard and a little muggy and a little warm. Hello, June, one of our bigger thunderstorm months. And we've been tracking isolated storms around the area, but nothing severe today. So We'll take that. And how about some of the pictures you all have been sharing over the last couple of days? I love it. You know, if you look hard enough, sometimes you'll find that rainbow, and this one was found in the Franktown area. Our high today of 93. We just missed the record of 96. We should be about 77 this time of year, and we'll be probably as warm tomorrow for many areas. Even with a weak front approaching from the north, it's relatively calm wind-wise in the city. Still 74 at the airport. Here in the backyard, a little moon above my head out here. 73 degrees, closing in on the 10 o'clock hour. And we're kind of watching a cluster of thunderstorms down to the south. There's a little center of circulation that's pushing this moisture up. And then with heating of the day, we're kind of seeing these storms stretch out. Not severe. And if you see rain, good for you. We've seen more lightning and wind kind of coming in with these storms. They've fallen apart coming off of the foothills up around the Fort Collins area and into Greeley. The low is going to stay to the north, scooting into the Midwest. The front is going to kind of sag and drop through northeastern Colorado tomorrow. That's one feature. The other is high pressure, which is anchored here. The flow around it is clockwise. So we get that tropical flow coming up underneath it. You get the heating of the day. And then with this front, we kind of need to watch where it's going to set up, because that will kind of decide the area that we might see a few thunderstorms late in the afternoon. Storm Prediction Center has the outlook for severe storms, hail and the like, well to the north of us. But extreme northeastern Colorado, Fort Morgan, out to Sterling, even into North Platte, these are areas we'll be watching. We think the front's going to set up south of the city, and that's where we have the best chance of rain from storms late in the day. But you know, it's the future, it's Mother Nature. We got to wait and see. So we'll be marginally cooler for northern Colorado tomorrow. I think upper 80s instead of the low to mid 90s. The front comes into the heat and all of that moisture. We get a few of the late day thunder showers down south. 104 in Phoenix tomorrow, 81 in LA as compared to 76 in Billings. So tonight, storms that we're tracking kind of move south, stretch out, and then they just kind of fall apart. Not expecting a whole lot from tonight's activity. And then we get some sunshine tomorrow. The front comes in, and then we think it's just going to kind of lay right in here. So Colorado Springs up to Ray and Sterling might see one or two storms. Should stay below severe limits, but we'll keep an eye on it. Temperatures in the 50s and low 60s tonight. 40s up over the higher terrain. Highs tomorrow, 88 in Denver, 87 Trinidad, 89 in Fort Collins and Grand Junction, and then mid 70s for the foothills for tomorrow. So another day very similar to today, and we'll be tracking the storms to the south and east. A little thunder and lightning to the south and east tonight, then skies clear or low at 60. Tomorrow, sun to start, clouds by the afternoon, and that should keep us under 90 degrees, but that's still 10 degrees warmer than average. We've got a couple of thunderstorms in Wednesday, a drier day Thursday, a few more in on Friday, and then back into the 90s we go for Sunday and for Monday. The lightning pictures coming in have been amazing. Keep them coming. Much more ahead on, well, all of the news of the day. We'll have the latest right after the break.
Baseball in July? Could be more likely tonight than it has been for quite a while. The owners and players with possible progress in their back and forth that has continued. Here's the latest. A very short 50-game season. That's the latest possibility, with the players getting the full prorated share of their salaries and an expanded postseason. Everyone will lose money, that's a given, but everyone loses if they don't figure out a way to play. So it's looking better for baseball. Basketball could be back by the beginning of August, and hockey seems to have the best plan in place. And what about the biggest of the big four? Mike Kliss is feeling good about football, and he details why on the pages of his notebook.
We are getting closer, everyone, to an NFL season. And yes, all signs point to a full NFL season, starting with the Broncos' preseason opener on August 15th. The question at this point, will there be fans in the stands? You should know the NFL has a way of getting what it wants, and it wants fans in attendance. Here are 3 steps they can take to make that happen. 1. Take the temperature of all fans as they are about to enter the stadium. Anyone who has a fever cannot be admitted. 2. Food and drink must be consumed in the concourses, not in the seating areas. And 3. All fans must wear masks. This is for the Broncos' 2 preseason games against the 49ers and Bears in mid-August. Guessing here, but Empower Field may still be half empty for those games. We'll see how the country's reopening is trending for the Broncos' regular season opener September 13th against the Titans. Do not think there will be fans when the Broncos open training camp, which is tentatively set for July 28th. For now, all plans are in pencil, not ink. Adjustments may well have to be made as the country learns more about the virus. Mike Kliss, 9 News.
Mike, thank you. Finally, CU head coach Karl Dorrell focusing on off-the-field things with the Buffs, tweeting out, quote, "I had a meeting with my team to discuss the recent events happening in the world. This is a time we need to foster hope, honest, open communication, and action. We will be providing a plan of action for changes as a team. It's more important than ever that we are together." Stay with us. 9 News returns right after this.
13th and Lincoln has been one of the flashpoints for a couple of nights now. Our Jordan Chavez is down there, and Jordan, it looks like there are some folks that are settling in for the long haul.
Yeah, these are kind of the stragglers of the protest, Kyle. Like you mentioned earlier, there are just a lot of people that were here and a lot of different decisions that people are making. These are the ones that have told us as they pass by us they're not leaving. When we asked what time they plan on leaving, they said they weren't sure. It was just kind of as long as it takes. They were here to make a point that this was not going to be the case of them leaving for curfew. I'm going to move out of the way so you can actually see them. I can't make out quite what they're chanting right now. Earlier it was, "We won't leave." Now, for a brief moment, about 10 minutes ago, I would say, we saw Jefferson County Sheriff's Office show up in riot gear. They weren't here for a lot amount of time, probably 2 minutes or less. They did a U-turn and then they headed east down 14th past the Capitol. Not sure exactly where they headed. Now, you can't really tell because it's dark toward the Capitol, but there are quite a bit of people hanging around up there as well. These people are adamant, though, that are hanging here between 14th and Colfax right here on Lincoln. They, again, like I've been saying and like you've been mentioning, they have no intentions of leaving anytime soon. At this point, though, it's been pretty calm. We haven't really seen any interaction between these protesters and the police. The only noises we've heard are from fireworks that they are shooting off right next to us. But other than that, guys, it has been quite different from what we've seen out here the past 4 nights.
Thank you, Jordan. A noisy crowd, but just sometimes noisy isn't a problem. Kyle, certainly haven't seen that for a few days.
Yeah. Yep. Hope for peace, pray for peace. We're so close, folks. It's 10 o'clock in Denver, and it's still calm. Our coverage continues on 9 News 10 over on Channel 9. Denver has been under its new extended curfew for an hour. Protesters are still in the streets, but things are decidedly different in Denver tonight. They're peaceful. They're calm. Tense, certainly, waiting to see what happens between police and the people in the streets. But Denver's police chief told us within the last hour that his officers will not move on peaceful protesters simply for violating curfew. So we wait and we watch. Curfew runs overnights through Friday morning. There have been 4 nights of protests now, and we have seen nasty stuff. The broken windows, the tear gas, the rock throwing, the dumpster fires.
And before these folks decided to break curfew, if you will, Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin joined many of them, marching with them. The chief spoke with protesters, answered their questions. He is scheduled to join us live during this newscast in just a moment and talk about what's happening now. We have a lot to cover tonight with the latest on tonight's protests. We're going to start with 9 News reporter Mark Salinger, who has been walking with the protesters from the daytime into the nighttime. Mark?
Yeah, Kim, you can hear right now that there is some sort of alarm going off behind me, as well as the Denver Police Department has, I'll let you listen into it really briefly here, just 1 second. You can hear over the speaker, there's a announcement asking people who are still here in Civic Center Park to go home, that they are now violating the curfew. Now, as you can see, there are several hundred people still here at Civic Center Park, continuing to protest even beyond this curfew. Now, I want to put this into context for you. I just spoke with Neil Yarborough. He's one of the organizers of this event. He was one of the gentlemen who was walking with Chief Pazin earlier today. He told me he asked all of these people right here just a couple of minutes ago to go home. He wants them to go home. He wants these protests to stay peaceful, and he is worried that if they continue to stay here, it won't. And for much of the day, for the majority of the day, it has been peaceful. All so far today, it has been peaceful. As you can see, there are some fireworks continuing to go off, though, right now. I want to show you a little bit of what it looked like earlier today and some of the folks that we spoke to and the message that they wanted to try and get across from this.
You're tarnishing a powerful movement right now, and it's not allowing us, it's not allowing our word to be heard. You know, the people that would listen are now upset because people's personal property is being damaged, you know, and that's not what this is about.
Oh, I'll be here tomorrow. I plan on being here pretty much every day until we see some change. If it's not protesting out on the streets, it'll be protesting in my own way.
Like, we still saying Black Lives Matter for the past decade, you feel me? And nothing has changed. People are still dying.
And again, so far today, it has been completely peaceful. We have hardly seen any police officers interacting with any of the protesters. They've let them protest, and the protesters have been peaceful. Of course, right now, there are a lot of protesters that are disobeying the curfew, staying out here past that 9 p.m. curfew. We don't yet know what will happen if the police officers, if the SWAT team will come out here like we have seen in previous evenings. We're going to stay out here and continuing to monitor it. Kim and Kyle?
Yep, fingers crossed for a continued peaceful night. Mark Salinger, you stay safe. I want to show you what happened earlier on today. It looked a lot like the previous days. There were marchers in the streets for the better part of the afternoon. They were loud, they were passionate, and they were doing the kind of thing that the U.S. Constitution allows you to do. They set up a memorial for victims of police brutality on the steps of the Capitol, and they shared stories, particularly from young people, talking about fearing a life ahead in which they worry about interactions with law enforcement officers. Our Jordan Chavez is also out there keeping a look at things. And Jordan, have you noticed things turning in terms of a feel within the last 30 minutes? It looks like some folks are digging in for the night.
You know, it's exactly like you said, Kyle. There's just a lot of people out here. There's a lot of different motives. The people that have passed by us that have told us they don't plan to leave, they don't have a time when they plan to leave, they are here. In fact, we heard that same alarm and announcement that Mark Salinger heard across the field from where we are. And let me tell you, these protesters over here, none of them even flinched. They didn't seem fazed by it whatsoever. The only time we have seen a reaction from them was about 10-15 minutes ago when officers with Jeffco showed up in riot gear. There was some brief back and forth of yelling at them, and then within about 2 minutes, the officers left and headed east down 14th past the Capitol. Earlier, we were hearing a lot of chants from these protesters, mostly "We won't leave." At this point, though, it looks like they're just hanging out, guys.
All right, Jordan, thank you very much.
Thank
Keep us
you,
updated.
Jordan.
We'll come back to you if events warrant.
And over the last few nights, we have seen a lot of fires, dumpster fires set in Denver. And tonight, Denver Fire got proactive to avoid this. They sprayed down the dumpsters, give them a lot of good dose of water, and they're hoping that that way they won't set fire so easily.
People who live around the Capitol have been watching these protests now for days, and 9 News reporter Katie Eastman has been out talking with those neighbors. Katie?
Yeah, Kyle, a lot of people around Cap Hill have said they've had trouble sleeping. This area right here at Washington and Colfax, it was the main area for the confrontations between officers and protesters. Tonight, it's quiet, but there are still officers behind me in full riot gear. Earlier in the 9 o'clock show, Jordan Chavez was saying he saw Jefferson County deputies getting in their full riot gear, hopping on a truck. I think what he saw were these guys. They came here to protect the District 6 police station. The people we talked to today, one person lives right across the street from this police station. Another person says he thinks the protesters shouldn't be destroying property.
Right here across our street is the precinct, the nearest one to the Capitol building. The windows don't stop anything. We have children and pets that are affected by the tear gas being launched at our building and at our residence here. You can see in front of the door the pepper bullets, the residue.
We cleaned it so good. Yeah, I live right over the street over there. You know, I look to this place as my home now, so and I want to take care of it, and I don't like seeing all the vandalism and stuff.
Things can be replaced, human lives can't, and that's why this all started in the first place.
If people want to peacefully protest, I'm all for that, but just don't vandalize. You know, these are people's businesses, these are families' businesses and everything, and they don't deserve to have their stuff graffitied on and vandalized.
And one thing Peter Garcia told me, the man that lives right across from this police station, is he can't go anywhere at night. Obviously right now there's a curfew, so he shouldn't be going anywhere anyways, but it's tough because there's officers right outside his door and it can be a tough thing to see. But so far tonight, no confrontations with the protesters. Kyle?
I'll take it back. Thank you, Katie. Maybe the neighbors will get some sleep tonight too. Thank you.
Peaceful protests in Washington, D.C. today turned chaotic when police tear-gassed a crowd so that President Trump could have a photo op outside the White House. Police cleared the protests to allow the president to walk down the street to St. John's Church, where he posed holding a Bible in the air for some time. Minutes before that photo op, the president announced he's invoking the Insurrection Act, which allows him to deploy the military to U.S. cities.
These are not acts of peaceful protest. These are acts of domestic terror. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God.
The president called himself an ally of the protesters shortly after police used tear gas and batons to clear the way for his photo op. The president said that thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers are on their way to Washington to stop the violence. The Insurrection Act was last invoked during the Rodney King riots in 1992. Governors typically prefer to use their National Guard troops because they're allowed to perform law enforcement duties. Military troops can't do that without violating an 1878 law that prohibits the military from being used as police inside the U.S. Late tonight, Governor Jared Polis and Denver Mayor Michael Hancock issued a joint statement saying that there is no need for U.S. troops in Denver. In a joint statement, they said the president's threat to deploy federal troops is counterproductive and will only stoke the potential for worse violence and destruction. This is a time for healing, for bringing people together, and the best way to protect civil rights is to move away from escalating violence.
Denver police arrested 284 people in the streets over the weekend. According to DPD, 201 of those arrested live in Denver or elsewhere in Colorado. 20 live out of state, 8 are juveniles, and we don't know about 55 of those arrested. DPD says most of those arrests were for curfew violations. We've learned that Denver police seized weapons and tactical gear from 2 men at Friday's protest. One of them is connected to a far-right extremist group that's preparing for a second civil war. Here's 9 News reporter Jeremy Hohola.
While people protested on Friday in Denver, Among them were 2 men who came under the eye of Denver police, and this is what officers say they seized from them. 3 assault rifles, handguns, and other tactical equipment like gas masks, vests, numerous magazines, and ammunition. Through social media postings and by his own confirmation, we learned one of the men is Chevy McGee of Fort Collins. We put him on air last month when he live streamed on Facebook.
Just being prepared. Show the people prepared. We're ready, rock and roll.
That was McGee's reaction in early May when another Colorado man, Bradley Bunn, was arrested by the feds for possessing pipe bombs. McGee told me over text messages the guns police seized were all in his trunk and that he and a friend were at the protest to see what was going on and provided medical and water to people. McGee and his friend were not arrested and not charged and claims he always keeps guns in his trunk because we are avid shooters. Police confirmed to us they seized the guns but would not comment on why they took the firearms without charging or citing the men. McGee identifies with the so-called Boogaloo movement, a group who says it's preparing for a civil and race war. Jeremy Hohola, 9 News.
And again, police will not explain why or how they seized the guns without citing the men. A post claiming to come from Antifa that pushed violent rhetoric has been linked to a white nationalist group. The tweet, shared around the country, claimed Antifa was going to move into white neighborhoods and take what's ours. A Twitter spokesperson says that tweet has no ties to Antifa, but to Identity Europa, a white nationalist group. Twitter suspended the account because it incited violence, and Twitter says the account is fake. We are keeping a close eye on everything that's happening around our capital right now. Sky 9 over the area near 14th and Broadway. Again, the crowds are still there. They have decided to break curfew, but they are mostly peaceful, expressing their views. Police keeping a close eye. We're going to hear from Chief Pazin talking about what's happening in Denver tonight after really 4 difficult nights before this. We'll be right back.
Denver Police Chief Paul Payson has ordered an internal investigation into an Instagram post reportedly by a Denver officer featuring 3 officers in riot uniforms with the caption, "Let's start a riot." Somebody took a screenshot, posted it on Reddit. Everybody saw it at that point. Chief Payson says it's not a free speech thing. The department has a policy against social media posts like that. And Denver Police Chief Paul Payson joins us live now on the telephone once again. Chief Payson, thank you again for your time.
Kyle, thanks for having us.
There is an officer on a bullhorn downtown right now warning folks that they are in violation of the curfew order and they need to disperse immediately. Last hour, you told me that your officers would not move on peaceful protesters simply for violating curfew. Is that still the case?
We will exercise good judgment and discretion. We want the peaceful protesters to start heading home. We hear them, we see them, we understand their pain, their grief, and we want to work together. And they've expressed themselves all day in a very peaceful manner. Let's build on this. Let's go home. Let's keep this city safe. Let's engage in dialogue, not destruction.
That's a different answer, Chief, than what you told me an hour ago. So your officers will move on folks for just violating curfew, even if they're being peaceful?
Again, we will exercise discretion here. We want to make sure that we maintain peace, but enforcing the law, the curfew, we must do these exercising good judgment and discretion.
In the 5 nights so far, this is the latest that we have gotten without violent confrontations between police and protesters. Is the difference tonight the way your officers are behaving, the way the protesters are behaving, or both?
Certainly the way the protesters are believing, and we want to give credit to the peaceful protesters that really stepped up and had their voices heard without causing damage today, as well as community members that continue to help by cleaning up our city. They absolutely believe in this city, the people that represent this city, and the only way that we can get out of this is by working together, and we want to encourage that.
Chief, I asked you this question earlier today, and I want to make sure that I understand the answer. You've called for internal investigations of that "Let's Start a Riot" Instagram post, also of some videos that appear to show your officers using excessive force against peaceful protesters. Are the officers involved in those incidents under investigation out on the streets tonight?
So we have a strong policy, and beyond holding our officers accountable for policy, we need to make sure that all of us, including myself, are accountable to our values. And anybody that can't do that will certainly not be out on the street protecting the city.
And in our closing moments, Chief, you walked with the protesters today. You talked with them. Did you learn anything that you had not heard before?
Well, I listened, and we had some very powerful conversations. A young lady that shared with me that she's tired, that she's in pain, that her heart hurts. And hearing that directly from a young person that's engaging in peaceful protest, somebody, all of them, these young people created space for us and allowed us to join their march. And then they corrected me when I said that. They said, "This is our march." It was a very powerful moment, and it's something that we need to build on as a community. We, as a police department, recognize and acknowledge that we can do better. We want to work with these young people and others to have a better police department, a better city, and a better community.
Denver Police Chief Paul Payson, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Kim.
Autopsy report refutes how George Floyd died. This autopsy done by the family doctors who performed it on behalf of his family say he died from asphyxiation due to neck and back compression. Floyd was pinned to the ground with a knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes. He pleaded with police, told them he couldn't breathe. The official autopsy cited underlying health issues and potential intoxicants in Floyd's system as factors as well.
After several nights of destruction, in came the wave of volunteers to clean up downtown. All weekend, we saw workers and volunteers who would come in the morning and sweep up glass. They boarded up windows. They would wash away graffiti. Some volunteers even rounded up the whole family to go downtown and help.
We think that a lot more people should give out the love for here, and maybe we won't have all this other negativity that's going on around us.
No matter how bad you destroy our city, our community is going to come together to build it up again.
The amount right now that we're having to deal with the graffiti is just a little overwhelming. The Greek Theater, the Voorhees Memorial, the structures that people have been coming to for over 100 years.
And you saw some pros out there as well as the volunteers. That's a contractor that the city hired to power wash the graffiti.
Business owners around the Capitol say they've had to deal with the destruction and the weekend riots as well. They've broken windows, graffiti to clean up, and they're shut down altogether in some cases. The owner of Martha's Beauty Salon on Colfax says she was lucky this weekend. Her shop was spared. She did have to deal with damage, though, from Thursday night. It's an unexpected experience when she's just trying to stay in business right now.
When you have business, maybe you can have money for pay everything, but look at this, no business.
Valadez says it's hard enough with the pandemic going on to replace a window or even board it up. She says a window could cost her about $500 a piece.
93 degrees in Denver today for June 1st. We missed a record by 3 degrees. And then there was this, the sunset, just enough cloud cover and moisture for a beautiful shot off to the west. And you know what? The color was spectacular up and down the Front Range today. The high of 93, way above the average of 77, and will be above average again for much of the week. We have a weak front approaching from the north, but it's relatively calm wind-wise in the city. Still 74 at the airport. Here in the backyard, we have light winds. I can see the moon above my head, and we've heard, you know, a little bit of thunder and lightning in the distance. There have been a few showers reported down south, but here in the city, the weather's been relatively quiet today. That may change tomorrow with the arrival of a front to the north that'll interact with some of this moisture coming up from the southwest. It's rotating around high pressure, which is set up over the area. And as this front begins to nudge its way into northern Colorado, we do think it'll set up around Castle Rock, extending out to the Lyman area, and that's where we'll see 1 or 2 thunder showers and maybe some beneficial rain. The hail-producing storms will extend from North Platte up through Minneapolis tomorrow, and we do have a slight cooling trend for the northern half of the state. But tonight, the thunder showers down south will move out quickly. We get a clear night, a calm night tomorrow with sunshine, the heating of the day. 1 or 2 of these storms may bring some beneficial rain, but also a bit of lightning. Lows tonight mild again in the 50s and 60s. High temperatures tomorrow will be above average in the 80s and lower 90s. And again, that's a trend we're going to see for much of the upcoming week. And so in the metro area for tonight, we are calling for partly cloudy skies and a low of 60. Tomorrow, sun to start, clouds by midday, temperatures 10 degrees above average. Slight chance of a storm each afternoon heading into the upcoming weekend with highs near 90 degrees. And keep those wonderful weather pictures coming. A break and we'll be back.
Baseball in July could be more likely tonight than it's been in quite a while. Perhaps progress in that back and forth between the players and the owners. The latest, a shortened season, a very short season of 50 games with players getting their full prorated share of salaries and an expanded postseason. Everyone's going to lose money, but everyone loses if they don't figure out a way to play the game. So it's looking better for baseball. Basketball, they're hoping to tip off by early August, and hockey seems to have the best plan in place. And what about the biggest of the big four? Mike KUSA is feeling pretty good about football, as he details on the pages of his notebook.
We are getting closer, everyone, to an NFL season. And yes, all signs point to a full NFL season, starting with the Broncos' preseason opener on August 15th. The question at this point, will there be fans in the stands? You should know the NFL has a way of getting what it wants, and it wants fans in attendance. Here are 3 steps they can take to make that happen. 1, take the temperature of all fans as they are about to enter the stadium. Anyone who has a fever cannot be admitted. 2, food and drink must be consumed in the concourses, not in the seating areas. And 3, all fans must wear masks. This is for the Broncos' 2 preseason games against the 49ers and Bears in mid-August. Guessing here, but Empower Field may still be half empty for those games. We'll see how the country's reopening is trending for the Broncos' regular season opener September 13th against the Titans. Do not think there will be fans when the Broncos open training camp, which is tentatively set for July 28th. For now, all plans are in pencil, not ink. Adjustments may well have to be made as the country learns more about the virus. Mike KUSA, 9 News.
Mike, thank you. Finally, CU head coach Karl Dorrell focusing on off-the-field things with the Buffs today, tweeting out, quote, "I had a meeting with my team to discuss the recent events happening in the world. This is a time we need to foster hope, honest, open communication and action. We will be providing a plan of action for change as a team. It's more important than ever that we are together." Stay with us. 9 News returns right after this.
Continuing to watch a tense but peaceful scene in downtown Denver tonight, an hour and a half after the curfew hit. We heard the police chief walk back his comments to us at 9 o'clock that they would not move on people just for violating curfew alone if they were being peaceful. Now the chief's saying they will use discretion, but they want people to go home. So we watch and wait.
We have a couple of views from the ground at Colfax and Lincoln. The crowds are still there, many chanting, "We won't leave." They want to get the message out about what they've been sharing during the peaceful daytime protests, talking about inequality and why we need to change things in our country.
Coverage continues on 9news.com. We will break back in if events warrant. Good night.